All right, well, hey everybody, and thanks for joining us. And as promised, I have Brian Berglund here. And Brian runs a software company. I'm going to let you tell a little bit about the name of the software, what it does, and all that sort of thing. So why don't we just kind of start there?
Okay. I own the Amarius software company, and we provide an agent-based software solution for user productivity, security, and basically understanding exactly what's going on the desktop.
Okay, so I wanted to I guess just tell everybody how we got connected here. So I understand you actually went through our security sales mastery program, or one of the programs or something I did a long time ago.
Yeah. So when I was with an MSP, I went and viewed most of your training programs and started to build a practice under security, and since left to start my own business.
Okay, so that's cool, right? So we can take some responsibility for being an incubator. Yep. Entrepreneurial sort of thing. So the thing that connected us again, though, recently was I was looking for software or some kind of solution to help people who are running into this issue we always run into, which we'll talk about later, but in more detail. But it just started out with this little thing. What do you do when people are sharing a drive in a network? So I want to get into that a little bit later. But before we get into that, can you just give us a sense of why you made the transition? So you were with an MSP, you're building a security practice, yeah, and then you decided to drop out of that and go start a software company.
Yeah, so
how did that happen?
One of the biggest things from the MSP side that I saw, we give these users technology, set up their desktops, completely set up their entire network. But once you leave as an MSP, you don't know what they're doing with it. So we wanted to get right down to the user level of, well, here's all the applications we gave you. Here's how you log into everything. Now, how do you get through your day? How do you get access into the applications? What do you do with the data you have access to? Where do you store it? We don't get to see that anywhere. So we wanted to understand exactly what the user did.
Okay. And of course, nobody really knows what the user's doing, do they?
Not
Especially
at all.
In these smaller businesses.
Yeah.
So most of the folks that are in this program and would be watching this video, I would classify probably came out of the technical side. In many cases, not everybody, but most of them came out of a technical role. Saw an opportunity to go out and build a company, and of course, a lot of these companies are older. I'd say they probably been around, some of them 20, 30 years old. So they started out when computers were, they were just kind of selling PCs, moved into networks, and probably around 2003 moved into that MSP space. And I think probably over the last, at least over the last 5 years, I think, have seen a tremendous commoditization in just MSP service. And so now everybody's trying to get into the security space, right? That seems to be like the hot open the door thing. So that's why I invited Brian here, because his software has a lot to do with security at the end node, but it's not antivirus. So but I know that the big factor, the big thing that everybody here wants is, how do I get more leads? How do I differentiate myself when I get into a sales conversation with somebody? How do I make my MSP different than the guy next door? Because they're all doing the same stuff. They all have some back end, whether it's LabCorp or Continuum or Kaseya or one of those guys. And they're going to do patching, and they're going to do antivirus, they're going to back up data, and they're going to monitor systems. But at the end of the day, none of that really makes sure that the data is safe, confidential, the integrity, the availability, all the things that we find in security. So what we're doing is we're leading with this assessment, concept. And when I saw your software, I thought, there's a lot of applications here. And so what I would like to do is kind of dive into them and maybe hear some of the big, horrible things that are happening in small businesses who aren't thinking that this end node piece is an important part of the security puzzle, and that antivirus is enough. So, I guess maybe a good place to start really is that shared drive thing, right? So here's a typical scenario. Maybe you can kind of tell me how, what you see out there and how you address this. But we'll go in, we'll do an assessment. They've got a server, and a lot of times that server is just a big workstation acting as a server, and they've got a shared drive on it. I've got 5, 10, 20 people out here, and we're accessing Word files and Excel files, and everybody's got access to the same shared drive, and they're all working on these files. And they might have their own password to the server, But there's no log. There's no way to know who accessed what, who did what with anything. So when you go out and you look at people's computing environments and you see that sort of thing, what are you seeing? How are you addressing that? What do you think they should be doing?
Yeah, so one of the biggest questions that have been asked is, well, one, who has access to the data? What do they do with the data that they have access to? And are they stopping from doing things maybe by mistake, maybe on when they want to do it? But what we look for is, let's assess what's going on. And leading into your assessment is, Active Directory has the ability to do read-write shares, read-only, based on credentials, based on groups, and then Active Directory probably stored some access to it at some point. You have to go read an event log.
Which nobody's going to do.
Nobody's going to go down that path. So what we looked at is, well, if you give us a share of somebody who has access to it, we look at what the actual users are doing with it. What are their user actions? Are they copying it from that folder to another folder? Are they uploading it to a website? Are they attaching it to an email? And we can track that and send that back or prevent them from doing it based on who they are or what group they belong to, based all on policy. So now you have full user control access to a folder on the network, rather than, here it is, good luck, don't know what's just going on with it.
Okay. So do you have some examples of companies that you worked with where they weren't securing that kind of data and people were stealing data?
So
or
we worked with a software company similar to ours, where I'm a software company. I install it on my employees too, to make sure they're not copying code and throwing it up on a share site like GitHub or something like that, or
right.
looking for help. We actually locked down a folder on the network to make sure they're not stealing the code itself. They're allowed to take the executables out that they created, but not the actual code files that got stored there. So we can prevent them from copying it off to another drive, uploading it to a website, anything along that nature. And it works with source code, Excel files, you name, whatever sensitive content, or it might not even be sensitive. It might just be particular IP, like CAD drawings, or tool and die shops and stuff like that have some kind of secret that wants to be stored there, and we want to maintain that it gets stuck in that folder.
So you said when you started talking about it, you were talking about a company that you'd worked with who was a software company like you are.
Yep.
So what was their story?
So they had they were writing software locally on the laptop in a local drive. I'm not going to say, but they don't back it up, which is well, that's bad news already. But they were storing all their source code files locally on the C drive. Well, the engineers would turn over through the day. New engineer come works on the laptop. They could throw that on a thumb drive and take it with them. So we locked down the folder that they couldn't throw that on a thumb drive, or they couldn't email it to their personal email, because that's the actual source. Now they could take the executable with them, put it on a thumb drive, and allow that out the door, but that's okay because it's compiled and you can't really decompile it too well. So we allow that, but then shut down the actual source code from being stored.
Okay, so if I apply that to what these companies are doing with Word and Excel and that sort of thing, we're saying we can know who accessed what file.
Yep. Who accesses it?
We can stop them from moving it.
Exactly.
So, for instance, if I've got data that can't leave the server, and you're not going to allow me to copy it to my laptop or put it on a memory stick or something, or can I what about emailing it somewhere?
Yep. Can email it.
So I can log all that stuff there.
Yep.
And how easy is it for me to see that? I know we mentioned you could look in your log files, which I've had some of my clients look and see, are there actually logs that they can find that show any of this data, and they have told me in many cases they can't.
Right.
How easy is it for me in your world to know this is going on?
Well, so we do two methods of that. One is either allow it and get alerted on it via an email with a couple clicks on the console side, or run a report on a daily or weekly basis that says what happened, or lock it down. When you lock it down, it's actually right when it happens, the user gets a notification saying they can't. And then that gets sent back in as well as an event, and then the event can be triggered, or say, here's all the events that happened this week that somebody tried to do it.
Right. So I could monitor it,
Yep.
but I could also lock it down.
Correct.
Okay. Because, one of the things that scares me, and I'm sure you thought about this, but if the data is on my server and I own the company, then I have every right to do whatever I want with that data. But if that data goes onto your personal laptop, then legally I have no recourse, right? I can't go on your computer and get it back if you leave the company.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, legally you can't touch the laptops.
So if everybody, I hope everybody understands that, right? If you fire an employee and they're using their own device, bring your own device, and they have your data on their computer, you cannot wipe clean their drive.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
You have no access legally to touch somebody's private stuff.
Right. So, and it's probably on their phone if it's not somewhere else, like an email. I know I have a lot of attachments on my emails because all my email comes to my phone and my laptop. So if the company owns a laptop and the individual owns the phone and the email comes to the phone, then that data is on the phone.
Yep, it's
right?
on the phone.
So, all right, good. So, so that kind of takes us to another area maybe which is somewhat related, but what other kinds of intellectual capital are you protecting at the end node side?
Yeah, so if you look at where you're moving your data, a lot of you talked about earlier when we were discussing things about moving data to the cloud or information stored in applications. So we worked with a client that they have secret formula, and it's stored in their main line of business app, which is an SAP application. Well, the formula is clearly visible to anybody in the organization until you set up the access controls in the app to not allow them to see it. So your engineers should see it, right, because they're developing it.
Right.
But one of the big things happens is that you can screenshot it, right? You load up the application, you screenshot the formula, and then you put it in a thumb drive or an email or whatever it might be. Well, with the solution, since we're at the end user's desktop, we actually know that when they're going to do that. So we can prevent the screenshot of those types of applications. You have to set it in the policy, but you can now prevent them from taking a screenshot. Why did we do it? Because, well, let's face it, someone took the formula. So if you figure I have 10 products of formulas, someone takes one, I lose 10% of my business.
Right.
Because they can go to the competitor, get it made cheaper, faster, you name it. They could get it, pretty much crumble of business depending on how many formulas you have.
Yeah, so that brings up an interesting question because I sense that a lot of the if I go to a small business owner, and even a lot of the technology providers I'm working with, I think are somewhat thinking this way. But the thought is that if I've got a small business and there's 20 people in my company, and I know all these people, that they're not going to steal my data. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're dreaming.
So why do you say that?
Because everybody, no matter if they're your brother or your sister, there's going to be some kind of feud at some point. You're going to get mad at one another. You're going to get mad at how the business is run. Maybe you find out the person next to you is making more money than you. Well, you're going to take whatever it is that you did and take it to the next place because you become valuable to the next business by having more information in your pocket. What I know in the world is information is king. The more information I have, the better off I'm going to be. So if I take my sales lists or my client list, which we've seen done through an Excel file, thrown on an email, or sent off to a personal email address, that's now king to the next employer that you go to, and it doesn't matter who you are.
Right. Okay. So I hope everybody hears that, right? People run into issues. They run into circumstances. They get mad at companies. They steal data.
All the time.
And it's it's not happening in my company because none of my people would ever take anything. But most of my employees are related to me, so they can get in trouble. And most of them are my kids. So
yeah, kids are a little easier.
So I'm going to withhold their allowance if they and they can't actually leave even if I fire them. But most companies aren't like that. So, all right, good. So, one of the other issues I was reading this article in the I guess it was Wall Street Journal, right? And they were talking about what business leaders are most concerned about, and I felt like at the end node there's a lot of things happening that maybe aren't really so thought about. So let's talk about a few of those things. You mentioned cloud a minute ago, so I want to jump down that road. So let's go down that road for a second. I've had a number of companies come to me and say, well, this company I'm calling on, when I was talking to the business owner, he said, well, everything we have is in the cloud. And that's becoming more, in fact, if you were to come to my office and say, where's your data? I'd say it's all in the cloud, And people question that, is it more secure in the cloud or is it more secure? Well, the truth is, the average business owner is not going to spend enough money to create a big enough security thing going on in their own office. So they're putting it in the cloud, and it's actually probably a pretty good idea, as long as the cloud is reputable. Mm-hmm. But we need a response back, because you and I know that just because their data's in the cloud doesn't mean they're secure. Now, the hurdle I want to throw up here, just so we know there is a hurdle. Most of these small businesses, if they have their stuff like in Amazon's cloud, for instance, or Dropbox's cloud, Dropbox and Amazon are not going to let some MSP do an assessment on their stuff.
Correct.
Not going to happen. So I know we were talking about this last night, and this really piqued my interest. So if you could kind of go through this with everybody in the video here today. The idea of being able to go in and say, well, you really ought to assess your laptop, because there's actually a lot of security happening right here at this thing, and it's much bigger than just AV, right? Yep. That's where everybody, or any zero-day defense strategy.
Yeah, we didn't want to get in the antivirus world, that's for sure. It's already been tried and true tested.
Right, so this is not about antivirus.
Not antivirus.
You need antivirus though, right?
Yeah, get antivirus.
You need antivirus.
You need
or some zero-day.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But most activity, like you mentioned Dropbox, it's usually a local file copy. SharePoint's the same way. You get a local file copy of a folder, and that's where you store it, and then it syncs it back to the cloud, which is essentially another file server sitting out there with a tool to get it there. Agents, or our software on the desktop node, will be able to scan that folder for changes, scan it for sensitive content. We can hook it with that protect the document pass we talked about earlier, where they can't take it from that folder and move it to another location. But it still has to be on a company asset. That's the biggest thing we talked about yesterday. I'm not a big fan of BYOD. I work with my financial clients about what they're protecting. If they're trying to protect sensitive data to their core, we would set up virtual desktops. Let them use their personal laptop, connect to the virtual desktop where our software is running, see if they copy anything local to their local C drive, which is now personal, and then you lose it, right? But we'll be able to see what they're doing from that location rather than having to install anything locally on their drive, because it's personal. But company-owned assets, you have the control over it. They sign the agreement when they walk in the door that they can be monitored, they will be monitored, right? So we can utilize the software to do that, is to monitor every action that they're doing and see where their data is stored locally on that device.
So when somebody goes out and does an assessment today, here's kind of what they do. They might go in and do a scan, which means they're looking for antivirus ports that are open, stuff like that. If they're following my process, I'm saying, well, you really need to go talk to the asset owners, find out what's important about that company, find out how much downtime they can afford, what kind of data they can afford to lose, and then you're looking at the infrastructure to see, if they got hit with ransomware, for instance, how fast could they recover, and you're hopefully collecting some data. You're looking for, symptoms of malware, somebody connecting to a command control center, things like that. But I know there's a lot of stuff happening at the workstation. So when you and I first started talking, you were saying, well, I got this assessment process that we can actually just do on the end node. It's not about antivirus. It's not about malware. It's about other stuff. So can you kind of just take us through like what that means, like some of the things you've seen, what you're checking for, and it'd be great to have some illustrations or stories of stuff that you came across people were doing and a company wouldn't have known if they hadn't dove into that assessment at the end node.
Yeah, so our assessment, we look at the user side of things again. Everything's done by the user. What websites are they going to? Is it business related, personal? Are they sending emails? What type of emails are they sending out? What type of uploads are doing? Downloads? Can they install software? We get notifications of installations. Are they changing things in the registry? What are the users doing? Print jobs, you name it. So when we do that, we usually walk into a business or have a reseller resell it through, and we install it the first week and let it run in what we call data collection mode. And then we let that run for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the number of users.
And that's an agent sitting on the end node?
Yep, agent sitting on your laptops and desktops. And you're probably going to say, well, why so long? Well, when somebody sees somebody new in the business doing something, you change your user behavior. So after a week or so, our tendencies will actually fall back into our normal human behavior. And we caught things in our assessments, like a secretary storing the presidents of the C-levels credit card information in her Outlook notes. Well, Outlook notes is not secure, right? It gets synced up to the exchange.
So that's not malicious, that's just stupid.
It's just stupid.
Okay.
But it's good to say.
But it's good to know.
We pointed it out. Look, you're storing it here, we can get you a password safe or something like that on your desktop to stop them from doing it.
Right.
Right? We've seen emails being sent out with customer lists to their personal email. Well, there goes your entire customer list. We also caught a financial advisor cheating the system and taking bad loans because of data that they're storing locally in a local Dropbox they shouldn't have Dropbox, communicating with another bank personnel from somewhere else, transmitting loan information. So you can see basically everything the user is doing, and then from that we help them write their security policy. Like, look, here's what we've seen, here's the 4 leak points, you have USB devices, here's what went out on them, here's all the email attachments, here's what went up through websites. 90% of these companies that we do these assessments on do nothing about personal email. You're not stopping them from using their personal email, whether, most of them are Outlook, Microsoft shops, but now you have Gmail usage, Hotmail usage. Well, that's a leak point, right?
Right.
Same with printing. Printing, no one's really watching the printer, but what if you saw you're an architectural firm and you saw 50 drawings got printed at 6 o'clock at night when no one's in the office? Well, now I took all my architectural drawings and went, here you go, here's a way to do things.
So you're not just telling me I printed, you're actually monitoring. And can I set up alerts like that say, well, if you print this kind of stuff, I want to be notified?
Yeah, it's all done through emails, notifications, so you get instant notifications. Every 30 seconds an event comes in, and then from there it can be emailed off to somebody. Maybe you have a financial institution that has a remote office, right, and they usually have a security guard watching the vault. What if we just sent it to them saying, Joe Schmo on the teller line just printed the president's account information.
Right.
And they can stop them before they walk out the front door. So you can utilize that capabilities and notifications throughout the organization, no matter where you're at.
Right. Okay. All right. So you mentioned the first week. So generally, how long do you run that assessment for?
Between 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay. And when you finish that assessment, what does that look like? What comes out? Is there a report, or is it just what is it?
So we deliver a 30-some page report. It covers. We can have samples to send you, but it covers a set of leak points as well as spots where we believe as security officers that you need to monitor. So we show them, here's what happened. We don't ever put a user's name in there. That's for you as an assessment that you can say you want to know who it is. We can turn you into a license, but in that report, we show all the potential things that they've done over that time period. And nothing was being prevented. It wasn't being prevented before we went in there anyway. So we just wanted you to get notified on it. And then from there, we can start locking down and doing policies. And we usually train our MSPs on how to do that service so that they have the ability to handle that service up front. And then we look for the license on the back end.
Okay. So in our world, like in our model, of course, you've looked at a lot of our stuff. We're telling we're telling companies you really want to lead with that assessment to discover what the urgent issues are. So if you were to look at small business today and say, what you think the top urgent things are that are probably happening in 90% of the company. If I could back up a second, what I'm really looking for here is, like when I get in front of an audience, like if I'm doing a lunch and learn, right? Mm-hmm. I know that 90% of these people have not done any kind of security assessment in the last year for sure.
Correct.
So if I can show, and I also know they have no insight into what's happening on their networks at all. So if I can show them that the likelihood of there being malicious activity on their network today is probably pretty high, you haven't assessed it in over a year or more, and you have no intelligence, no insight into anything that's happening right now, it would be really stupid to not do some kind of assessment right now.
Correct.
Okay? So, but I know kind of, in my world what I'm looking for. So as you go out and you do assessments with companies, what do you kind of expect to see almost 90% of the time after 2 weeks or after 3 weeks of watching that I can pretty much count on? This is going to be a big issue if I can just get the business owner to realize how bad this is.
Yeah, we'll see 90% of the time USB devices are used constantly, or their personal email. The employee that's sitting there late at night going, I can't get my job done, and they send the data home to their home PC, and then they go work on it at home and send it back. Is it malicious? No, they want to get their job done, but now you just sent the stuff across clear text out to the world and on some random server.
Right. And do you think a business owner has any concept of why using personal email would be bad?
Based on the fact that they all use it, no.
Probably not. So there'd be some education.
Yeah, there's some education there
to do there.
I mean, you can allow them to read their email because maybe it's important. Sally's kid's sick from school and they need to get notified of it, but then stop them from uploading files to it. Right? Let them read their email, but don't allow them to steal stuff.
Right, so that's pretty cool. I don't have to block them from using email because I know a lot of employees have to keep tabs with their child care person or whatever. So they they need access, but they probably don't need to upload attachments.
Correct. Especially coming off your own network.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's probably the case. So you mentioned the 4 leak points, and that was interesting. You just hit those really quick again.
USB or removable devices, that's thumb drives, CDs, DVDs, Bluetooth enabled files, shares on the machine.
Okay, so I can monitor or block.
Or block.
Okay.
Yep. Set them to read only if you have mortgage lending, right? They have to take the camera. They go out to the site, they take a picture of the house, and they come back. They got to load it,
right?
But you can't write back to it, so it's set to read only. Email attachments, right? That's another leak point. In email themselves, like you basically throw loan information in an email, send it to you, like, hey, here's your information and your balance.
Right.
That's got to be stopped. And then anything that goes up to the web, and I call up to the web your personal email, things like sharethisfile.com or beam it, even Dropbox and OneDrive. I relate to those because they're essentially taking data and sending it somewhere up to the cloud. And then print's the big one. So USB-based printing, network printing. If you still have an LPT1, it's still tracked because we actually watch the print queue to make sure they're not printing sensitive data that maybe they shouldn't be. I mean, everything's electronic today, right? HIPAA says electronic data. Well, then they still print off your receipt. They still print off your medical forms and hand them to the next person. So you might want to know that.
Right. Okay. So actually, you mentioned HIPAA. Let's just head down that road a second. There's probably a number of compliance things that are going on here that can be helped by this. So you can talk a little bit about that. Like, where do you see the compliance play?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me in compliance was that if you read through all the big rules is that you need to tell the auditors what people do with the machines that they have access to the data. So can you log what they do all day? And that's our primary goal, is to say, here's what the user did. PCI says if you have access to credit card information, you need to know from when they log in to when they log off, what they do on their machine all day. Did they go to websites that they shouldn't be going to? Did they print things off? They need to be notified of that. And that's all inside of that. Same with HIPAA's, you have access to patient record information. What are you doing with the patient record?
Yeah.
So if you walk into a medical facility, right, you go to see your physician, you're probably in a little exam room, there's a PC there. The physician's supposed to log into it, ask you information, key it in, hopefully lock it before they leave. Otherwise, the patient has access to their entire network.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So think of those like, they're by themselves potentially in those rooms too. What are they getting access to? Are they stopped from using personal email in that little office cube? Probably not. More than likely not. But so those are the leak points that you can potentially see, because you get the visual, what we call the last 18 inches, which is if you look at your PC, you're 18 inches, which is 18 inches away from the screen at all times.
Right.
So we look at that person.
Okay. So compliance. The other thing I was talking about that CIO article, right? So the number one thing was how much exposure do I have, and so what are those hot buttons? But the second thing that they mentioned was the inability to know where their data is. So we talked about the fact that people put stuff in email and that sort of thing. But you mentioned earlier that, I think before we actually started recording, you mentioned that you can actually track down where my data is. Like, you can look around and find it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So how does that work? Like, what does that mean?
We called it a spider. If you think of a web of spider, if you think of your network's a web, you would let the agent know based on content rules, like what is sensitive, social security numbers, credit card numbers, keywords, Boolean type keywords like this and this, regex expressions. You'd tell the agent, this is what I'm looking for, and then you give it paths, and it'll actually crawl out on the network and look for content, and then give you back a report. Here's the file I found, here's what we found in it, and here's where it's located, so that now you can start moving your data where you want it to be.
And this is all internal.
Yep, it's all internal, nothing outside.
Right, so we're not monitoring the dark web here, everybody understand,
just,
right?
Yeah, just your file shares, your local C drives. You probably have a user. When I did IT work, we'd have the network share, like the S for this, share for everybody, a U for the user. Mm-hmm. You probably called it H, who knows? But we can go look in each one of those paths to find out where is the sensitive content. Maybe the secretary, not in an email maybe anymore, but maybe she's got an Excel sheet that has all the credit cards in it for the CE level. All right, she still hasn't come up with the password safe. We can tell you that that's located and where that's at, and maybe we can help her, secure that better.
Right.
So at least now you know where it's at instead of hunting and looking and doing it yourself, which takes forever.
Sure. Okay. So if you look at it at businesses today and you think, well, this what's the profile? What's like who's this built for? Who should be using this kind of protection on that end node?
Everybody.
Everybody. Well, that would be the answer, right?
We see the biggest success in finance, healthcare, and manufacturing. Finance for all the compliance rules, healthcare for HIPAA, another compliance thing. But manufacturing, I lump in manufacturing anybody who has secret sauce, right? It's some kind of IP you want to protect, whether it's your client list because you're a great salesperson, your CAD drawings because you're an architect, or software development like us. We have source code. It's intellectual property. I don't want somebody taking my source code and giving it to somebody else, or even having my guys post snippets of it up for help. I mean, you're basically saying, well, here's a function, I need help with this, but now you've given a function away. So those type of...
Is that pretty common?
Yeah, you can go look on... that's going to come to me later because I can't remember the website.
Okay.
But there's a site where everybody dumps code to get help on specific areas, and then other developers help out, but they're all getting access to that capabilities.
Right.
So we try to say, well, if you need help with a specific thing, talk about it, get them to help you, but don't give away, here's everything around it that makes it work.
Right.
So.
I know it happens in the marketing space because I belong to several marketing forums, and I know people are constantly posting their latest ad campaigns and stuff, and I'm like, I wonder if the ownership of the company knows that their entire new product launch that they haven't.
Yeah, here's what we're going to be sending in 3 weeks. Right.
And they're just looking for critique, but it does, some of those things look like stuff that hadn't been announced yet.
Right. Well, you see those announcements all the time, like this, but Google Pixel 3's new thing just got released or leaked.
Right.
Right. So somebody in the company is putting it somewhere.
Right. It's going out somewhere. Absolutely. So good. So I would like to spend a couple of minutes and talk about what the right profile is for the kinds of companies that should be offering this type of solution. Kind of how they get involved with you, what that relationship looks like. Do you sell direct? Do you just sell through the channel? What size companies are, give me sort of the channel picture.
Yeah, so I came from MMSP.
Right.
We had anywhere from 3 users to 200 user accounts. I want to help them, right? I want them to have the abilities that I saw as a need for our business, and then that's why I switched. But to give them the benefit of being able to help the end user and keep their clients either compliant, secure, and even know what's going on. That's why we came up with the motto, know now what you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
So to
know now what you need to know.
Yep. It's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, explain that quickly. Don't just pass over that. Know now what you need to know.
Yeah. So what don't you know now is what your users are doing with the technology.
Right.
So know now what you need to know, because you need to know what those users are doing.
Right.
Right? Because that's going to help you secure that machine, secure the entire process, improve processes potentially with user productivity. So you get to see all that right at the desktop. Right. So we work directly with brand managed service providers or resellers. You basically, give us a call, set us up. We'll do a demo. We'll walk you through the solution. Sign a reseller agreement. You get reseller discounted rates per user per month. It's very affordable if you look at everything else in the network or out on the planet. And then,
are you able to quantify that for us? Affordable.
Affordable. So our MSRP is $15 per user per month if we dealt direct. I don't publish that anywhere.
Okay, so if we got like a 10 user person, I'm just going to pay $15 per
user per month.
Each one of those things, $150 a month,
and then they're covered for security and productivity. To a reseller, we reduce it down to $10 per user per month.
Okay.
So then so it fits into the model of the desktops they're covering. Most managed service providers I know usually charge per desktop for support of it, right? Manage it, make sure the antivirus is up to date, and there's a cost associated to each one of the desktops. Well, we're just going to add on to that desktop and make it a value add. Package B gets more security, $10 a user.
Okay. So do I have to pay any sort of membership fee to become a reseller? Or?
There are no reseller fees. We do training, so we'll train you on how to install the server software. It's multi-tenant, so you can host it. You can put it on the client. More than likely, the client will want it in their network somewhere. But we train you on how to do that the first few times, and then basically, groom the bird to fly out of the nest.
Okay. Does the end user client owner of that company get to see this data, or is it's what I release to them either on paper or on screen, or how does that work?
That's up to the managed service provider what they want to do, but it's role-based counsel, so they can have a client be able to access their own data and see what's going on.
Okay.
Or the managed service provider can set up automated reports. So we don't want to be giving you more work as an MSP. We want to just say, here's how you got your policy set up, here's what's being blocked, send off alerts to the client, send off alerts to you if you need them, and then automate the reports on a daily, weekly, monthly basis so that they get delivered what they need.
Okay, so if I can recast that in the way of my typical reseller would want to see this is, I can set up what reports I want to receive. Like if I do quarterly, a lot of these guys do like a quarterly review,
Mm-hmm.
So I think what they would be going is, okay, I want to see this information every quarter, and then kind of summarize, roll that up for a particular client, and be able to take it down and show them kind of what's going on in their world. And so that I could do that.
Yeah, exactly. So you can bring down to them, here's all the websites that have been accessed, here's email attachments that went out, here's print jobs, here's everything around the 4 major leak points, because as a business owner, they rely on you as the trusted advisor, but they may not actually implement anything right away. So let's just start showing them so that they do believe this is what's going on. So you can provide that on a quarterly basis. For sure, stick it in the envelope.
All right, so so that's how you become a partner. It's real easy, right? Just
Simple.
contact you. We'll make sure we get information out to everybody on how to do that, and so you can kind of show them if they're interested in building this into the thing. I think the reason I invited you to participate in this is I don't think the end node is really being addressed except at that 0-day protection malware comes in. But when I read the reports, read the studies, what I see is way more than 50% of the security-related things are happening because an end user did something that they just didn't know any better.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
They either leaked data. I see a lot of data being put out in public places just because nobody thought about it. Clicking on stuff they shouldn't have. I don't know, just all kinds of stuff that they just don't know. Right?
Yeah, I think the latest one that I saw was someone put sensitive information on a web share, right? It's in the website folder by accident.
Right.
Right. Well, if you could hook the web folder, then we can see what gets copied in there, and we notify, hey, at the end of the day, here's all the files that got tossed into that folder, and you realize one's bad, then we can delete it before someone else has access to it. I mean,
Right.
Those are easy solutions to solve.
And it's easy to make that mistake.
It is.
I know.
Drag it the wrong spot.
Yep.
I'm sure as an IT person, you've gotten that call where I had a file yesterday and I can't find it. Where did it go? And they just dragged it to another folder.
You accidentally dragged it into some folder that's public. Yeah. That's what you did, right?
Yeah. So what if we showed you that? Like, here, somebody just moved this file. Oh, don't have to go to a tape. I just go back and move it in the other location, and then you're back.
Right, exactly.
So.
All right, very good. Well, 2 industry things before we close here. One is, how important do you think security is to the overall managed service company today?
It should be really important. But my guess is it's not. It's slowly creeping up. I mean, we're seeing a big change in trends, where it used to be like we were doing the same, like, you really need this, and now it's like, well, I do need it. How do I get it?
Right.
It's been slowly changing to that direction.
Yeah, I think it's such an urgent thing, but I think so many resellers are not investing in security. They're thinking because they sell firewalls, they're in the security business, but they're not really talking about data, which is what I like about this conversation. It really is all about the data at the end of the day, right?
It is. Data's king, remember that.
It is. And Wall Street Journal calls it the oil of today.
Yep.
So I love that. Well, good. Well, let's wrap up here. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks,
thanks for sharing your information with us. I think it would be really helpful for us.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.